Think they're gonna do it tonight?
Hope
to.
always a fortunate guy like fan, but I always have a book.
Nice.
Mom's would not be
Hey, you.
good. How you doing? Good.
What'd you get mad at?
Morning. Morning. Good. How are you?
Thanks for doing this.
Absolutely.
He's got a meeting.
Thursday, we were all talking about it. I was like,
Yeah, the hackathon.
man, I'd love to have a class on this, but I don't know how fast we get together and train.
There we go. Get her done.
I always go to the class.
You got your own, so. I watched one Friday,
Did you?
online. They do their latte and learn,
Oh, yeah.
but Fridays, so they just did it online because of the weather. And it was like 2 hours with whatever that guy's name is, but he made some good points. I took a page of notes that I'm gonna go over that's not these changes.
Yeah. Beginning of the year with, his family, and I think we could go there for the change, but
Yeah,
she's not paying. Going and paying anymore, so.
yeah. She's still licensed?
Yeah.
Thanks, sir. You want to sit by your son? No, no. We'll get it next time together. Yeah.
Back in the day, the only MLS KCRAR office was up north of the river. We didn't have the one on state line. So it was a little more of a drive to go up there.
Seen that before, where like I run down to like 11 hour, and the only place you can take it is either online or up north.
Yeah. Yeah. Morning. How are you? I don't know if they're still at the same address, but yeah, it used to be quite a haul. Hey, Paul. Back when we had MLS books
Yeah.
instead of online, and you had to buy the forms they were carbonless forms. You had to go pick up boxes or pay a bunch to have them shipped. So now that's not a office expense like it used to be.
No, but I'll bet it was nice to not have the everybody had to come to you if they wanted to see it.
Yeah. And my partner at the time, which would have been like 90, 98, 99, somewhere in that era, this is going to ruin the real estate business. You know, they won't need us at all. Well, we're still here, and they're using us at a higher percentage than pretty much ever before, buyers. So that's why when the changes came in August about all the commission and stuff, I was like, seen it before. They put MLS online and that didn't kill us. Zillow hasn't killed us. Open Door hasn't killed us. So hope I retire before somebody does. Be done with this.
It's a bad little attrition.
Yeah.
You just gotta make it.
Stick around. And back then, you could list a house with one page. Contract was like 2 or 3 pages. There was no home inspection industry. All the addenda, there was none of that, you know, the cyber and the inspections and all that. It was short and sweet, but well, maybe. Jeez. But the bad part back then though was if I wrote an offer, I had to take it to the listing agent. So sometimes that was a lot more driving.
Yeah.
I couldn't, I mean, faxes weren't legal. There was no scanning. MREC didn't allow faxes until several years into probably the early 2000s. So we were still hand delivering. Morning. Then they allowed faxing, which wasn't that good of a deal because we had faxing for several years, but the problem was it'd be blurry. Then you'd get a second generation fax back with the seller's signature, and then it's even blurrier. And you have to dig out a printed copy to try to figure out what it says. So. Yeah, exactly. Then it's, yep.
Did you used to put your pager numbers on your signs?
Yeah.
Yeah, you did.
Morning.
So you call your pager.
Yep. 816-395-9746.
You gotta memorize.
Haven't had that since probably 98.
My wife's number, we had that phone, that was the first phone I bought, I had to, that was the first phone.
I think 97, 98 is when I got mine. I had the same number since they went digital. When I had a bag phone, that was a different number, but it was analog and it was like listening to an AM station with static and everything else. The bag phone I had probably in 95, because my first wife and I bought a house out south of East Lynn, and it was a party line. I'm like, this is no way to conduct business. So I bought a bag phone. Well, to use it, I had to drive a block and a half to get kind of up on a hill so it would work.
Yeah.
But yeah, party line, that was fun with dial-up internet. Try 3 teen girls next door. I had to stay up till midnight just to get on MLS. And if yeah, on a party line. And sometimes I'd be on MLS or the internet or whatever, AOL. And if they wanted to use the phone, they would just start tapping the receiver till it disconnected me. So then I'd wait till they got done. Morning.
Oh, morning. Thank you.
Welcome. Okay, I'm going to start. It's 10:05. So I don't know how many of you might have seen me do this at last week's meeting. This will be kind of a recap, but I do have some bonus stuff from a Zoom call I was on with KCRER Friday. So we'll have a little bonus stuff at the end. I'll make you wait for that. So I was just telling Aaron how much this business has changed and the forms and everything since I started, when you could list a house on a 1-page document. You could sell a house on a 2-page document. You didn't have home inspections, no resolution, no inspection notice, no cyber notification. There was really no addenda. Simple times, but we didn't have dot loop. We had to get wet signatures. We had to deliver the offer to the listing agent, typically at their office. So you had a little more driving. Then they allowed faxing of the contracts, and we were also excited because we could fax. Then they'd get blurry. Then it would get faxed again once the seller signed it, or if you had a counter offer, if somebody initialed a change, it get faxed back and forth, and you just ended up with this mess. Then of course we got dot loop, and we can scan, and everything stays kind of pristine on what we're doing. But a lot more papers, but we don't have to drive to anyone else's office, so that's nice. Yeah, we got two. Exactly. When they put our listings on the internet, well, first we had like a DOS version of the MLS. So the public couldn't get in there. It was only for us. That was after, so we used to get 2 books about this thick, like phone books. And phone books for you youngins, that was back in the day of where you could look up people's numbers. Yeah, real paper, black and white. And then if something sold, someone would draw an X through it. And in those times, you would take a buyer out, and I had it happen several times. They're like, pull in the front driveway. Nah, I don't like the looks of it. I don't want to even go in. Where now they can look at 99 pictures of the inside, and they know what they're getting at. And gosh, that was mid 90s when that started, probably, for the public. Bag phones. My first cell phone was a bag phone, and it's like the size of a shoebox. And yeah, yeah. So I got mine because we lived kind of out in the country, and our phone, this would have been 95, we were on a party line. A realtor can't survive on a party line. And I would have to stay up late because the neighbor had 3 teenage girls. I had to wait till they went to bed so I could log in with AOL, look at the MLS or whatever. Yeah.
Oh.
So we had, I'm trying to figure out how to explain it. Yeah. And it was, you could listen to the neighbor's phone call.
Say like your house,
And right. Well, I don't know if those even existed back then, but yeah, so everybody used the same line, and it would ring different. If you're getting a call, it's a different ring than the neighbor's ring. You can still answer their call, but it's not going to be for your house. And then when we dialed out, we would pick it up. I don't know if we had to hit a number, probably, and the operator would come on. What number? And I'd have to tell them our number because she didn't know. And so much of everything was long distance back then. So different times. Look it up on YouTube. So now that I'm done talking about how old I am, everyone get this? Okay. Lucky this year we didn't have that many changes. Back in August we had those changes, but I just thought we'd go through. So on this one, the top form, the contingency, that's the right one? No, it's not. Sorry. We'll get through this. That is talking about the resolution. So if, because of inspections, if you're raising the amount that the seller is paying towards closing costs, it just clearly spells out that that doesn't change our commission. And it's not, so on our contract, you list the commission you want them to pay you, then you list seller paid closing costs. This just states that if you're changing the seller paid closing costs, it doesn't change the commission that we're asking. Most of these changes I like. There's a lot of forms we don't have to use anymore, yay, including the trash dump that we ended up not getting. So those are gone. Um, what order is it? There is a new form. They changed the cooperation agreement between brokers. Now they call it the compensation agreement between brokers. I doubt that we're ever going to use that. It kind of takes us back to where one company's paying the other company. I really don't know when we would use that, where it wouldn't be in the contract. But if that came up, you would get the compensation agreement between brokers. And that's where I assume the listing company would pay the buying company commission, just like we used to do. Morning, you're welcome. So a couple of things I'd like to point out, and I know we've kind of harped on you guys for a while. Is it net commission? Is it gross commission? What's it of? Well, it's of the purchase price. So on A, I'm good if it just says 3% purchase price. By default, to me, that is gross. I've never done it to where I'm only asking the seller to pay based on net. If you don't tell them, they don't know. I'd rather get paid on gross. It's a bigger number. If you're going to do anything like that, or gosh, back in the day on expensive listings, and of course back then that was anything over 100,000, we would charge, say, 3% on the first 100,000 and only 2% on the next 50,000. Kind of a split commission. Nobody does that anymore, and I'm glad. But if there is anything different than just simply X% of the purchase price, be sure and write it in there on A, to where someone who's not part of the transaction, someone who's not in real estate, can understand it. For instance, a judge. If you get to court with that document, we want them to see and understand what you're saying. And if we get audited, I think they would like to see that too. They added the unrepresented seller to the buyer agency. Okay, so this is the buyer agency. If there's an unrepresented seller, a FSBO, you can write in there what you want the buyer to pay you. Same as the exclusive right to sell, where you're writing in what you want the seller to pay you. Other compensation, just put in, $399, $395, $400, $495 admin fee.
So does that take the place of the number one comments, the additional comments, right? For after?
Unrepresented. Yep. Yep. That middle one right there covers that. Okay. See what's behind this door. Okay, same thing, but that's on the exclusive right to sell. So talks about an unrepresented buyer, what you're going to charge extra to the seller if you have an unrepresented buyer, and then other compensation for admin fee or whatever you want to call it. It's a necessary evil sometimes to use occupancy after closing or occupancy prior to closing. Not a fan, but I just did one last week. We had to do it. I was representing the buyer, which I'm more comfortable with letting my buyer move into someone else's house rather than to have my seller let a buyer move in. So basically on the contract, if possession date is anything other than closing or funding, we need this form. And and you can put zeros in there, but there's cases if the buyer's moving in 2 weeks early, the seller might want some money. And it talks about when they're moving in, what time, if there's any compensation to the buyer or to the seller, like the seller may want to stay an extra 2 weeks. Talks about a deposit. It talks about who's going to pay the utilities. And then it's still, like in our contract, it talks that the seller will deliver the house to the buyer in the same condition it was in when they looked at it. So if a tree falls on the house, they can't just expect the buyer to go ahead and buy the house. They need to fix the tree. If the furnace goes out, they need to fix the furnace. Well, this spells out who's going to fix the furnace if the buyer owns the house, but the seller's still living there. Or if the buyer moves in before before they own it. So all this stuff spells that out. And we end up, in the rare case that the furnace quits, everyone knows who's responsible for what. Obviously, the seller can't ruin the sheetrock and punch holes in the sheetrock and drop a couch down the stairs and damage the sheetrock or whatever. So that's going to keep us out of trouble in the case that something like that happens. Oh, okay, this is the lower part of that first page that talks just in depth about the occupancy, and then the back page and where they sign it. The septic system addendum was renamed wastewater something wastewater. Yeah. And that's pretty much the only change on that form. Wastewater instead of septic. Yeah, so if you're looking for it, look in the W's. Okay. The form didn't really change, they just changed the name. Just simply because there's other types of systems that are not called septic, I guess. Oh, sorry, these aren't in the order I want. Probably my fault. Okay, on contingencies. Previously, it said that the seller would notify the buyer's agent in writing. This talks about the form kick out notice, notice of backup contract that gets sent to the buyer. And then there's another form that talks about the choices that the buyer has to either get their house under contract, prove that they can buy it by paying cash, or prove that they can buy it without selling their current house. So a lot of times someone may make an offer on a house and they're like, I want to make it contingent on selling my house, but they really don't have to. And so if they get this kickout notice, then they make the decision of, okay, I'll go ahead and buy it without selling my house. Or looky here, we just got a contract on our house yesterday. Send that to the listing agent and that takes care of it. At that point, if you look on the contingency form, their earnest deposit becomes non-refundable. The earnest deposit. If you remove the contingency to sell your house, then your earnest money becomes non-refundable. Like if you get a kickout notice and then you say, okay, I can pay cash or I can buy it without selling my house, then, or I got a contract on my house, then your deposit to that seller is non-refundable. You can still use it at closing, but it says it's non-refundable. Yeah, yep. It gets real in a hurry. Yeah. And we talked about it, and there's too many times that the buyers just say, I'm backing out. Well, the sellers don't really have time to sue them. The seller's best bet's to put it back on the market, unfortunately. So the buyers know that they're not out anything unless they get a discrepancy on the earnest money that's being held at the title company and nobody wants to sign the cancellation and agree on who gets that money. And part of my notes that I'll get into in a little bit kind of covered that on the in its present condition form. They added a line to the disclosure. Used to, it would say any termites or other pests or something to that effect. Now 7A is simply wood destroying insects and termites. And 7B adds in bats, rodents, and other nuisance. So I think their point was just to give the seller another place and another reminder. Oh yeah, we've had that hedgehog going in the crawl space or under the shed for 2 years or whatever. And so it's there to kind of jog their memory. The disclosure, we require it as an office. It's not a law that a house has to have a disclosure. Every association is going to have a different disclosure anyway. But it is a law for that seller to disclose anything, any material facts about the house, anything bad. And excuse me, the disclosure is just a form to simply kind of guide the seller and ask all the questions that they need to be answering. But it's not a law to fill it out, but it is a law to tell your buyer anything you know about the property that's bad. And then it of course asks a lot of other questions so the seller can relay to the buyer the age of the furnace, the age of the roof, has the roof ever leaked, stuff like that. Which one is this? That part of sorry. Okay, this is a unrepresented seller, like a for sale by owner. And it doesn't talk about, so on that form, it used to show what we were going to charge that seller to show their house to our buyer. Well, we can't do that anymore because you're going to have a buyer agency agreement with your buyer. So just as always, we put the buyer's agent commission in the offer to the seller. So there's no place in that form, seller's permission to show and commission contract, I think is what that's called. 7C says that the broker may report sales information about the property to the MLS. If the seller doesn't want their house in the MLS, and if you don't want to put it in the MLS, just write that here. Seller does not want their house in the MLS. Then you don't have to go through all that. I know MLS would love to have the data, but I've done that because I don't want to go through the hassle of putting something in that I've already sold. And I'm not representing the seller anyway. So we're not going to get in trouble if it's in writing. In its present condition. The guy that taught the Zoom class really hates this form. And I thought of you. And they've changed this from a couple of years ago. These numbers used to mean a little bit something different. As you know, the contract says we have 10 days or whatever you write in that blank to do inspections. Send your resolution to the seller of Well, one, I want to cancel the contract after inspections. Two, I want a different price on it. Or I want you to pay more closing costs, or I want you to pay closing costs, or I want you to fix the light switch in the kitchen and 17 other things. Box one takes away the right to negotiate. So if your buyer clicks box one, you either buy it or you don't buy it. It gives you the right to cancel. Box two and box three do not give you the right to cancel, even though people still freaking do. Now, if you call a listing agent and say, because we're box one, we did inspections, my buyer does not want the house anymore. Any listing agent's going to say, well, what could we fix? How can we change it? How can we make that right? So at that point, you could have just thrown this form in the trash because it really didn't mean anything.
You know, a lot of times buyers will use that form, check box one, and then they'll come back and ask for stuff too. Because they know what's listing agent.
Yeah. But to try to keep the sale together, any good listing agent's going to say, well, what could we fix? Because you don't want to go back active. You're going to cost the seller 5 or 10 grand because it went pending to active. Yeah. The other two have a little more teeth, but buyers still kind of ignore what this form says. Box two gives them the right to do inspections, but they can't cancel. They're locked in. They can still do inspections, but they can't come back and negotiate price or terms, and they also cannot cancel. Buyer waives any right to renegotiate. I think on box two and box three, if you're a listing agent, let's make the earnest money out to the seller. Non-refundable, have them write that check to the seller. Why not? Seller. The seller pays the buyer. And then at closing, the title company credits the buyer with that amount, with seller held earnest deposit.
I didn't need it.
Builders do it all the time. Put it on a counter offer. Yeah. It's because the buyer.
That would still work out.
Yeah. I mean, send it back in a counter offer. Yeah. And unless you write it in, maybe that in the case the buyer loses their financing and we get a denial letter from the lender, then the money's refundable. It's going to be sticky no matter which way you do it. You're always going to be counting on, if they cancel and they've got box two or box three, the seller's going to say, I'm not going to sign that cancellation. Well, and the buyer wants the money and the seller won't give the money, so the title company holds it. Yeah, if you really,
Something did come up like that.
yeah, if you really mean it, why is it a problem to make it non-refundable?
Sorry that happened.
You were the listing agent?
Yeah.
Yeah, you had a buyer just flake out. That's a good point. I think, and like I said, you could just spell that out. You know, buyer's not entitled to their earnest deposit unless they're denied.
That was finance. The other reason that wasn't part of
Yeah. Yeah. Um,
the point to bring up.
yeah. And when you're, you know, instead of putting Paul Felt land title, you just put seller on that line, and then you check the box that says non-refundable.
Make it have to be seller.
It's against what we know and what we've always done.
That, we're supposed to exchange money between buyers and sellers. But you're right, and you build, you do it.
Yeah, builders do it almost every time. So just a thought, and just sticking with earnest money, if you're representing the seller, obviously you want a large deposit to make the buyer feel like they're in the game. You also, if they're doing box 2 or 3, you want that money. If you're representing a buyer, let's try to give a smaller amount. My cousin called me one time, it's been 20 years, buying a house, wanting to make an offer on a house cash. And he said, well, can I just I'll just give an earnest deposit for the full price of the house. I said, well, you want to risk that money in case something goes goofy? Let's just give him $1,000 or 500 or whatever. I knew what his point was. He goes, I want to make this offer look strong, but there's a few chances, a few things that could happen to where title company's holding the money, the seller's not going to sign the cancellation mutual release to give you back your huge earnest money. So if you're representing a buyer, let's go for 500 or 1,000. And then I know a lot of sellers are going to come back in a counter offer and want more. And if you're the seller's agent and they're trying to do box 2 or 3, consider the larger amount non-refundable. Just to kind of make the buyer feel like, because their agent may be saying, oh, we can check this, but you can always back out. You know, an agent who's either crooked or doesn't know the rules. And of course, there's none of those out there. Not here, I hope. Let's see what else we got. Hell, are we done? These kind of came in a different order, so I don't know. Okay, any questions so far? And then I've got a couple other things I want to touch on. Be sure the bottom of your form, whatever form you're using, says 2025, please. We're required to switch over, I think, by February 15th, but the 25 forms are out there. Let's use them. So that's the contingency. Once again, I think this year you're not going to be writing a lot of contingent offers because we're so low on inventory. It's getting old. It's getting really old. I had to fight with 6 other offers last weekend in the blizzard on a house. We lost because we didn't go box 3. I'm in the middle of multiple offers right now in Olathe. They've got, she wouldn't tell me how many offers, but they got several. And so far, we're close to 20,000 over list price. Okay, this is stuff they covered Friday at KCRER. Covered that. Be careful on the occupancy prior to or after closing. Call me if you want before you use that, but just be sure and read it. On the escalation addendum, just beware that you might not get a copy of the proof. So you offer 410, but hey, my buyer will go up to 425 in increments of $1,000. Listing agent calls back and says, okay, we're escalating you up to 425. Okay, can I see the other offer? Well, no, we don't have another offer, but we're countering to you at 425. You kind of laid that card on the table. So, and I'm pretty sure the form spells that out. The form says they're supposed to give you that form, but sometimes they won't.
We're represented by, we go in and we say, we're gonna offer this, but we're willing to escalate this. But then they don't have to prove you via another offer that you can. Oh, they just a strict counter.
They're just countering because you've already told them we'll pay this much. So why they require sending that other offer over, not really sure why. I mean, it'd be nice to see it. And it'd be nice if,
You know,
well, it's up to the seller to be like, hey, I want to see it or I'm out, or the buyer.
Yeah.
Or the buyer could be like, well, we're willing to pay that. We'll just, yeah, let's do it. Because the seller could always counter whatever number. And so you've sent over a pre-approval letter.
that escalation is contingent upon another bond. I used to write something.
Well, that's in there. It says that the seller's agent has to present you the other offer. But what's keeping them from saying, we don't have another offer, but I want 425. And the buyers are like, well, we said we would pay it, so. Yes, sir. Yeah, that question. Yeah, where are those?
So isn't it correct that you actually, if they ask you, you actually become by, proof that you were in their broker or if they ask?
Yeah, I've never heard that.
I don't, it says that, but yeah.
Giving snippet of that next best offer.
Screenshot or whatever. Yeah. But I still think, yeah, I mean, same. But exactly. Yep. And that's, good for the listing agent. They're getting a little more money for their seller, I guess, if they're saying, look, I'm not going to show you, we don't even have other offers. But you gave us this, you put your cards on the table. If your buyer will. Mhm. So in a good, perfect world, the escalation, let's say the other highest offer is 220. Then the agent could come back and say, hey, for 221, you got it because it was under the 425 that you said you would pay. Okay, send over the counter. But I can see listing agents coming back and saying, hey, I'll be honest, we don't have other offers, but if we counter at 425, we'll take it. So I mean, it, I would kind of find out what the buyer wants to do. You can say, look, they're telling me they do have they're telling me they don't have other offers, but they're countering at your limit on your escalation addendum. Do you want to pay it? The buyer may say, no, that just doesn't feel right. That doesn't sound right. In reality, what's $5,000 when you're paying $425 for a house? A real small percentage. But if the buyer just doesn't like the way that feels, they don't have to do it. Then the seller's agent, if they don't have other offers, they're going to come back and say, well, how about 420? And you're just negotiating just like you always would. So it says it's required, but I mean, if I'm a listing agent, if we only got one offer, I don't know. Depends. Yeah. Yeah.
But you're saying even with the escalated court, if you get in that situation, the listing agent does not have to provide you.
I mean, the form says they do, but but make sure the buyer understands, hey, the form says they're supposed to send it. They're telling me they're not going to send it. They've countered to you at 425. It doesn't feel right, but do you want the house? Yeah, you should ask. Yeah. But we have buyers that check box 2 and 3 and still back out. So what's on paper, that's the right way to do it. Yeah. Seller. Yeah. And like on deposits, I think self-included, we kind of get in a hurry when we're writing the offer. We'll have a 10-day inspection period, and if you back out, you get your earnest money back. Or if you lose your financing, you get your earnest money back. Well, you only get your earnest money back if the seller agrees to give it to you. And if the seller is upset at you, they may not sign the cancellation, and you're entitled to your deposit, but the seller ultimately decides. And if you don't want to give it to the seller, it's going to sit at the title company for, I think it's a year. Then they send it to the unclaimed funds at the state. Then you go through court and you try to get your money back. Oh, I bet they've got billions in that account. So, yeah, that's always been something that I think newer agents might, yeah, you'll get your earnest money back. And then when they don't get their earnest money back, they're mad at you because you told them they would get their earnest money back. So it's ultimately up to the seller. Everyone has to sign the same form, right? Cancellation and mutual release. Right. I think my last thing, and that was something they covered Friday. What do you do if you've got buyer's agencies for two people that want the same house? So you're writing offers for both people, and it's not your listing. That would even complicate it even more. So Jenny at Century 21 has a house listed, and you've got two buyers that want to write offers. What I've always done is you can't tell either buyer, you know, hey, I wrote another offer on this one yesterday for X. So you'll have to go higher than that. You can't do that because you're representing the buyer that you just screwed by telling that amount. So tell them nothing other than just to let you know, I wrote an offer on this house earlier today or yesterday, and you guys are going to be fighting, but I'm not going to tell either one of you anything about the other offer. It's the only way to be fair. Let them decide, let them both know. So you write the first offer, buyer number two the next day says, we want to write an offer. Let buyer one know, hey, I know there's multiple offers on this house because I've written two. I'm not going to tell you anything else. It's the only way to be fair. We don't need any more forms. Jeez. I these things are possible. I get real careful when somebody, well, the most common question is, well, what should we offer? I have no idea. But you've been doing this 30 years. That's why I know I have no idea. There could be other offers. I don't know what's on the seller's mind. You know, they could be getting close to foreclosure. They could be wanting to pay off their credit cards and they want this amount to do that. You know, the kid may have just crashed the car. It puts the seller's going to be in a different mood every day. And they get in a real different mood when they get to look at 3 or 4 offers. So I don't know how much you should offer. What I tell them is to make an offer that makes them happy if they get it, so they don't feel like they overpaid, and make an offer so they're not mad when they find out they missed it by $2,000. My wife's grandfather did that to me one time. Multiple offer situation. This has been several years. Cool property. Hey, I love it. I'll pay X. Well, we didn't get it. Then when it went in MLS that it sold and closed, he asked me, well, what'd they get? I told him the amount. Well, I would have paid that. You had your chance. You know, we knew there was multiple offers, but there was no escalation clause back then or anything like that. So make an offer you're happy with if you get it, and make an offer you're happy with if you don't get it. You know, don't regret what you paid for the house or how much you missed it by. Simple, simple. That's all I got. We got any questions on anything? I'm here to answer whatever. Plus, you can always call me. They're out there.
Yeah, so that's my not really honest about that, and I don't want to work with them.
Yeah. But it's not our decision. It's never our decision.
Right.
We're just the go-betweens. Hey, I'll give you some advice, but here's your 2 options. Here's what could happen if you take either of these options. Yeah, and I mean, there's some buyers are like, we don't even care. We got our lease is up. you know, we gotta go. We love this house. We'll do anything. Cause I love those buyers. What do we have to do? I'll do anything. We'll buy it. But yep, you're right. They're supposed to. Hey, I tried, but they wouldn't send it.
If on the listing agreement, they say we have multiple offers, they don't have to do that unless, it's in writing on it. They don't have to.
And even then, they don't have to. The buyer may be just like, well, okay, yeah, we'll pay 425. True. Yeah, and then it also says you can disclose other offers, that there are other offers, and then you can give prices and terms. And then,
The seller's telling.
yeah, but
What is it, right? Seller's given the permission to say there's multiple offers, but not discuss the details, or the buyer's agent, we don't know that, we don't see that document, so the buyer's agent, we can call and say, well, I'd like to see them. We don't know what they've been given permission to do. On the escalation clause, what it says, you will provide me bona fide, whatever it says.
and
Cause I've had that before, and I've had, buyers who say, well, or a listing agent tell me that, oh, I'm going to take it down, I suppose it right here, you have to. And I think
But-
9 times out of 10, if you act like you know more than them, and say that to them, then they'll send it over.
but
I've never not sent it over, I've never not sent it over.
At-
myself.
at that point in time, the seller hasn't signed that document yet, so they're not bound by it. They're just making a counteroffer. So it's still an offer at that point. It's not a contract because it's not signed by all parties.
All signed. All signed, I sent that to you, contract.
That you escalated.
I feel like they don't provide that. Right. That would be what happens. You have to report back on that.
If the seller signed, yeah. But I think most of the time you would you would find that out before the seller signed the offer
I've
and the
never
counter offer.
escalated.
Yeah.
Prove it. Here we are, we signed it, we go. So it's signed.
At that point, it's got some teeth because they have signed it. But still, will they send it?
Seller's first to be done.
Because you've thrown that figure out. Yeah, until they sign it. And then even then, they may not. And the buyer may not care. We don't care. It's 5,000. My wife loves the house. Let's buy it. So, I mean, there's a million things that can happen in each paragraph of every document we fill out. Um, damn, I just had a thought and it went away. Thought I turned that down, maybe not. What else? What's weird out there? What have you seen? I had to buy a furnace once. It was my fault. That was my biggest screw up to date. Well, this is way back when we faxed contracts. And It was one of the very, very few foreclosures that were out there. This was pre-2008. And back then it was common. Nobody had to initial each page. You just sign the back page. So back then it was common. I would send over the 8-page off, probably 8 or 10 pages back then. Now they're 16. Send all those pages over. Listing agent would get the seller to sign the back page. They didn't have to initial anything. She sent back the back page. Great, we're under contract. What I didn't know is that they lined through the part in the offer that said seller to replace furnace in the basement. I didn't know that. She sent back just the back page. We're getting real close to closing, and I'm like, when are they going to put in the furnace? Oh, well, no, we took that out of the contract. I was furious. I'm like, that's very dishonest. Dishonest it was. I called KCRER. I'm pretty sure I called an attorney too. I'm like, hey, here's what happened. Well, it's your fault. You didn't obtain all the documents back. I should have asked her to send me every page. Okay, there goes $4,000. I bought him a furnace. What could I do? Wasn't their fault. I think it was a $60,000 house, so yeah, it was a little bit more. It might not have been 4,000 because that's been 20 years ago. 20, probably closer to 25.
That person still around?
I don't think so. Yeah, she was pretty old at the time.
No,
I don't think I've dealt with her since. Trying to think of her name, but it's irrelevant. But yeah, and we've all paid to have a house cleaned, or we've paid this or that just to hold the deal together. But I hate giving my money away.
Everything kind of has some grit in the jeans. I feel like some sellers, they have no grit in the jeans.
Why am I looking at John?
Yeah, no, that's a big deal. Basically go in and do thousands. I mean, if they hired somebody going to do it good for them, they would have spent $30,000 to do exactly what they did. And we won't do that. We got no name, but it was pretty. But we have to defend them, because the reality of it is, like to think that everyone is out for the right thing. It's actually not. We all know, right? Faith or humanity, no matter what language you speak, is pretty much the same. There's a lot of really, really good people out there, but there's also a lot. So we definitely learned a lesson, valuable. That actually happened 3 times, well, 4 total. We had 4 separate times where we literally remodeled someone's house, basically doing a lot of like lawn and those guys do like the island. We basically went in and think that we're going to bring value to the table and just to have them turn around and do the quote, oh, we need to do that. And in reality, it's like, okay, right? So we built into our process now an inspiratory step in strategic conversation. And in reality, we want people to reality of it, there's a lot of things happening. And the entire time they could have completely been like, oh, we'll bring those guys in. And they work closely with more working. We can, have that stress relief, and we can have their contract signed and blah, blah, blah. That's exactly what happened. And they just decided,
It's a nice house now, we're gonna stay.
It's not a judgment, it's just the fact that it's not a thing, but this is our time and age. I watch it. Hey, you know, weeks going over, and we do a lot of like, get on the trailer, get on the work, and the other boys, they have to work here, like, but no, all joking aside, but we do a lot of like, stuff that most people wouldn't do. We're not gonna continue. Yeah, we kind of went back to what I learned when I first came on 2019, where we were doing basically your rate of percentages section and we're building like, hey, if there was, yeah, what we would do and wouldn't do. Shelby, I mean, we're keeping it very basic, forward to reality. There's just too much bandwidth in the net point earlier, like there's too much bandwidth where you can't keep doing them before you know, none of them have time for that. So that it does make sense if you go out and have 2 or 3 other clients that really do need to come. Hey, let's do a sale photo, maybe a thing, something to that effect, instead of doing one that you're putting all this time and energy and effort into that ultimately doesn't feel like it's servicing. Well, these
Yeah.
two are really for them and with them, and that would have been more beneficial to us to be their agent.
Yeah, so charging a higher percentage, of nothing. As a rule, pretty much the most I do is give phone numbers. Here's a plumber, here's someone for landscaping.
Yeah, I try to find people that, if my clients don't have money up front, you know, I will try to work with vendors that.
Build a closing.
I mean, I just had that situation in November, that everybody was honest about it, and worked out great. You know, I do worry about if it doesn't sell, eventually it will sell, but you know, they're gonna do what they need to do up front.
But again, you got the vendor to agree to it. Hey, it didn't close, they got foreclosed, whatever. The vendor agreed to it. You didn't promise the vendor, "Oh, I'll pay you if they don't," or you probably shouldn't. So,
Learned this lesson with last year with well, Royal, for example, they had a partner, they had an office in the process. Like Austin, these guys came up with a way to credit card or fine, but that's between them and them.
absolutely.
Because one of the things this point had happened out of the lessons learned this last year was people that did do that. We had mom and pop like contractors, like electricians, painters, you know, handymen, and they're expecting basically off these people's word because the work is on. So there's like for example, we had a $12,000 fee that was outstanding. Now, thankfully, that client, I was able to call in. The guy just like him, he got him. But it still took time, and those contractors were reaching out to us going, oh my gosh, are we going to worry about the work we've already done?
Mm-hmm.
So you're really taking the gamble, I think. That was kind of our lesson learned. We're putting ourselves really out there in ways that we really don't need to do. Because these relationships we have with contractors that we do all this work with is much, much more important than really knowing salary that pay them maybe not even close to your start like it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just had that happen, but everybody, I mean, the house closed, and everybody got paid, and everything. But I tell them up front, you know, are you willing, kind of like Raytheon. He knows that risk, they know that risk, they're Apex, that they're taking on. Same thing happened, we had a foundation guy and we had a plumber. And, they both understood the risk. I mean, they're not coming after me, it's the health administrators, you know?
Just, yeah, refer that client to a good plumber, a good roofer, a good painter, but that's their business.
Like anybody else who wants to pay them.
Yeah, they can put a mechanic's lien on it and get paid when it sells, whenever. Well, the disclosure asks if there's been any insurance claims on the house in the past 5 years. And it asks if there's ever been any roof leaks or, water in the basement. If you know that it did happen and they're lying, then you either need to get them to change that, or you're obligated to tell the buyers through their agent that it happened. Seller said no, but I know for a fact, or at least I was told by the neighbor, that one of those cleanup companies was over and they had to suck 6 inches of water out of the basement. This is what I was told. The seller says it's never took on water. We're just in between. We're just the messenger. And that goes a little off the point here, but kind of the same. This morning, I had a conversation with someone that wanted to see a house over in Belton, and it said it was 1,900 square feet. And I said, that house is not 1,900 square feet unless they added a 400, 500 square foot sunroom without a permit. So the buyer said, oh my gosh, well, on realtor.com, it says it's 2,400 square feet. So let me look at the tax info. So the tax info said it was 1,380 square feet. The basement finish was what the agent put in as 500 square feet. So what they did is they added it wrong, but they added the 1,380 to the 500, and they put that above grade is 1,980 square feet. Well, then realtor.com saw the 1908 or 1980, whatever it was, and then they saw that it was 500 in the basement. So on realtor.com, they're like, well, it shows 2,480 square feet. I'm like, it's about half that. And then a little finish in the basement. So that's always something I check. You don't want to walk up to a house and they're expecting it to be 2,400 square feet. You walk in and it's 1,300 with a half finished basement. So
Like, my, I know.
well, like Zillow and realtor.com are just going to pull from the MLS. So it's whatever the listing agent types in. But well, MLS is not accurate in this point because the agent accidentally or on purpose lied and put in the wrong number. But I mean, most,
Isn't it the square footage of
yeah, or you can just click the tax button. I mean, that's pulling from the county.
Right.
So a house that was built in 1900, probably not accurate.
Sure.
And if it's calling from the county, like a lot of people here, I had a guy from Texas came up here one Christmas and I put him in a billion houses. And remember, it's just the holidays and, the holidays and so, yeah, a lot of people up in these parts, finish their basements themselves and don't pull permits. Well, then.
Of course.
That's not in anywhere, no tax records or anything.
Unless it's entered by the agent when they list it. But then too many times the agent adds that and puts it above grade.
He was going Well, no, it's basement space professional. Well,
I mean, the disclosure says any additions or alterations. And sometimes you can just tell. I'm gonna go get a 12 pack and I'm gonna finish my basement.
nobody's out.
Yeah, there's just a lot of variables. And my point there is, you know, according to the tax records, it's 1,380 square feet. The agent happens to say it's 1,980 square feet. You know, Realtor says this. It's gonna be somewhere in between, but here's my source and here's what they say. That way we don't get in trouble when they find out its numbers are not accurate. Because the appraisal comes back. Well, you told me it was 1,380 square feet. The appraiser says it's 1,305. I want to buy the house cheaper. Well, I told you what the county said it was. And I told you what the agent said it was. You know, another appraiser could come in and measure it differently. And you're definitely going to get a different price if you have two appraisers walk through the house. Then you're responsible.
Yeah, a listing, I always put that on my listings as the buyer's agent's responsibility.
Yeah.
But that's to protect me
As a listing.
as a buyer's agent.
Give the buyer the tape measure. Hell no.
But I have that knowledge of the seller.
Yeah,
The listing agent, I always thought that as a buyer's agent, so I had my.
yeah, but you don't want to do it.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Hand it to
You
them if
want-
it's that digital thing. If it's a tape measure, you hold the big end or the small end with the one. That way they're the one misreading at the other edge. Yeah,
that's
and-
why okay, the buyer's agent, that's what the buyer is responsible for.
To verify.
Buyer's agent.
Yeah.
Also, you know, is an appraiser gonna count this as finished square footage? We don't. know.
And the basement square footage is not, it's worth 10% as much or 5% as much as the above grade.
Yeah.
But yeah, how,
Yeah.
and use the word about a lot. Oh, it's about 13. The listing agent says it's about 13 because we can't put inches in there. So is it 12.8 and they rounded it up? Or is it 13.6 and they rounded it down? Yeah, it's about this big. Here's what they said. Here's what the county says. Lay that responsibility off to somebody else.
So what can you do? Is that-
Don't put yourself at that much risk. Quit being so damn nice. Yeah. No, I understand.
Tell you what the seller needs, say you were still.
Yeah.
Don't trust them.
But it's a good thing to put in. That doesn't, they're not telling you what to do.
And in the
They're
end,
just putting responsibility back on you.
if you're sitting in a courtroom or, you know, in a arbitration or mediation or something, I mean, let's put that in there. That's just one more deck in our, or one more card in our deck. But it may or may not protect you, you know. But the more stuff we have to protect us and the less stuff, you know, we just need to be, I hate to say it, we need to be vague. It looks like it's about 13 feet. The listing agent says it's 13 feet. And then let them know that could be 12.10 or it could be 13.6 because we can't put inches in the thing. Oh, one thing I forgot to cover. If you have a listing and you accept a contingent offer, it's going to ask you how many days or how many hours is the kick out, I think is what it says in MLS. When you go back and you change it instead of from active to pending or whatever, you're going active to contingent, it's gonna ask how many days or hours is the kickout. There's a lot of contingent offers in there that say 30 days. I think the listing agent put 30 days because that's the period of time that the buyer has to sell their property. What it is asking for is how many days, if you have a buyer that tries to kick that contingent offer out, how long does the buyer have to remove the contingency? The form doesn't give you a choice to put in hours. It's 2 days if left blank, or it's however many days. You know, if you're the buyer's agent, put 5. Let's try to make it bigger. If you're the listing agent, you want it to be quicker. So 30 in that blank in the MLS is wrong. It's either, I wouldn't even put hours because your contract, your contingent form doesn't say hours. It just says blank calendar days. So put in your 2 or whatever, but there's plenty of them in there that say 30 and 45. No, they're not understanding the form. Couple of the changes, I don't know that that slide came through. One other change was that on many of the forms, they took out, of course, I'm not going to find it, blank days from the effective date. They've changed that to blank days after the effective date. So the effective date, the date that everyone signed, the date that your last person signed the contract is day 0. So if you got a 10-day inspection period, day 1's tomorrow. I guess people were, and I can understand, people getting confused. But their whole days, their calendar days, holidays don't count. Your clock's still going. 5 days, 10 days, 7 days. One other thing that I keep trying to do, but I forget sometimes, is earnest deposit. If you leave it blank, they've got 3 days to turn that in. That's quick. So back in the day, that said 10 days if in Missouri, if you left it blank, it said 10 days if in Missouri, 5 days if in Kansas. 3 happens really fast. And the seller could actually cancel the contract if you don't have it in within 3 days. They may have received word somebody else wants the house. They'll pay more. Okay, cancel this one. They didn't turn in their deposit. And there's no law that says you have to have a deposit. Pretty sure it's true in Kansas. I know it's true in Missouri. You can have a contract with 0 earnest money. Everyone agrees. I don't know why you would, unless they're like best friends and you're just doing the paperwork. So, what else? Tell me something stupid that you had happen, like buying a furnace or a refrigerator. I mean, we've all done something. I bought a furnace. Come on.
Didn't have that much money out, but 9 hours invested in painting.
Oh my.
Probably one of the largest stuff on any home in Dalton.
I remember that one.
But we did it, and then the very following day, they didn't want the deck, and they weren't gonna put a pool back, and my husband went home and tearing it off, and they burned it at our house. Oh,
That was an appraisal requirement, wasn't it?
yeah.
So
Yeah.
we've all done that. You do stuff to just make it close. And our office years ago, the buyer didn't want the deck. The appraiser said it had to be painted because of chipping paint. So we got it painted. It was one of the agents painted it. And then as soon as they bought the house, they tore. Actually, I think they had to build a deck. I think it was so rotten. FHA, USDA, whatever, VA, whatever it was. And the buyers are like, yeah, but we're going to tear it down and put a bigger deck. Can't close because the appraiser said this deck is rotten or needs paint or whatever.
On a house, and, we went ahead, it wasn't on a deck, but it was wood, like up the front steps, but the railing, you know, that you had to have. And, we had it replaced because I knew it was gonna be, it had wood rot and it's falling down. I'm like, let's get it replaced. So we paid for it, everything was fine, right? So had the appraiser, as an FHA, came in like a week later and said, well, that needs to be stained or painted. Now, how, you usually don't stain or paint something that's a week old.
No,
We had to do it, but I told the buyers, I'm like, if you guys, if you wanna keep buying this house, you guys are gonna pay it, because I'm not gonna get, or the seller, I'm like, we're not gonna be responsible for that. If then
Yeah.
that chips off in a year and I live up the street from you.
Yeah.
you know.
that's,
But-
yeah, that's the risk of doing that kind of stuff yourself. They're not
Yeah.
happy with it.
So, I mean, it was brand new. they painted it.
Unless you can convince the appraiser otherwise.
Mm,
Yeah, you can't paint that in the first 6 months, I don't think. Right, yeah. You can do anything, but it's not gonna be effective. For. Really? Yeah, there's so much moisture. All right, well, cool. Yeah, you're welcome. Absolutely. Yeah. If I happen to be sitting there when it comes across, my goal is 2 days. Because all that stuff that I have. One folder in my email program. And so, you know, if I look over it, I can see there's something. Fine. Sometimes 2 days is my goal.
He's quick. I've clicked send before and it's still thinking and he's already sent it back.